Well, I promise this will be the last one from the bug room for a while, but I had to show you one of the giant millipedes. Look at that. African giant train millipede. Can you imagine getting blisters if you were one of these? The way they move, how they move all of those legs when they go for a walk. Utterly, utterly amazing things. Giant African train millipede. Well, I'm going to put that one back with his friends. There's three of them in a box down here, and they're having a great time. So off you go, buddy. I want to tell the story of two disciples who went for a walk after Jesus had been crucified and then 3 days later had been raised by the Spirit of God to life again. These two disciples journeyed away from Jerusalem down to a place 7 miles away called Emmaus. It's a funny place. We don't actually quite know where it was. In many ways, it's nowhere and it's everywhere. And the point is that these two disciples were walking away from the center of the action, away from Jerusalem, and they were going to this nondescript place. And as they were walking, they were trying to make sense of everything that they'd heard. Walking's helpful like that, isn't it? What I would do to give to be able to walk with some of the people that I walk through life with, people that walk alongside me and guide me and help me to make sense of stuff. Somehow, when we're moving, it kind of helps. I mean, otherwise, quite literally, we can get stuck. But actually, the process of moving physically can sometimes help us move emotionally and mentally, particularly when we walk with other people. So these guys are walking along the road and they're trying to make sense. They're trying to make meaning or find meaning. I mean, it's possible to invent meaning as much as it is to discover meaning, isn't it? But as they walk, alongside them draws another and basically says, "So what are you talking about?" And they kind of look at this third person and say, "What do you mean, what are we talking about? There's nothing else to be talking about. Haven't you heard all that's been going on over the last few days?" And he says, "No, tell me about it." So they tell the story. And what then the third person begins to do is to tell a much bigger story, to put that story in a much bigger story of all that God has been doing since before the beginning of the world, and how everything that's been going on over the last few days is the natural fulfillment of that story, a bringing together of all of the different pieces, if you like. And then they reach a place where they're going to stay, and the third person looks as if they're going to journey on, but the other two say, "No, you come in and sit and eat with us." And so the person goes in with them, and the third person takes bread, and as he breaks it, suddenly the two people know who it is. They know it's Jesus. And what happens then is the talk about stories, the talk about meaning, suddenly moves from just talk and they find themselves right at the heart of it. It's become more than just a story about a nation or a people, more than just a theological exploration, more than just a study of the scriptures. Though I have to say, I'd love to have been part of that as Jesus traces all that he is through the scriptures. It was the mother of all Bible studies, and yet it's not recorded for us. But those guys were part of it, and more than just being part of a conversation, they find themselves taking their place in the story. That's what real meaning making does. It helps us not just to understand in our heads, but with our hearts, with our desires, with our hopes, with our longings, with our fears and with our despairs, to find a place for all of those things, to find integration with ourselves and with the world as well. That's one of the ways in which we might test whether a story is real and is true. Does it work for more than just ourselves? Actually, does it help to make sense of everything that we're longing for and feeling with things that are bigger, with things that are outside of ourselves? Well, Jesus comes and does this. He meets the people on this road away from the center of the action, and yet still comes to find them, just as he does in so many of those resurrection appearances. Even when they're in an out of the way place on a road to nowhere, Jesus still appears and helps them to make sense of everything. Well, it's pretty hard to make sense of everything else that's going on around us at the moment. There aren't any easy answers. There's no clear way forward. But there are perhaps some clues in that resurrection appearance of what we need. We need something that's bigger than just ourselves, something that includes what's gone before, but also opens up a new way of understanding the present, but also what's to come as well. For those of us who are Christians, we find much of that in the scriptures, much of that in a relationship with God, whose spirit lives within us to guide us, to be like Jesus, to meet us wherever we are, and to help us find a place in a bigger story and to lead us forward into that story. But wherever you find yourself today, my prayer is that something of that bigger story will become real for you in the midst of the reality of all of your longings and your desires, your fears, your hopes, even your despairs, like those two disciples on that road. Something will help you to connect with a bigger story, and a story that's about hope, a story that's about life, a story that's about light, a story that's worth dying for, and a story that's worth living for, a story that connects you with the different parts of yourself, and a story that connects you with those around you. Even in a time of loneliness and isolation, we all need to know that we're part of something bigger, that we're connected to other people. Well, I'm about to head off for a walk. I'm not taking the millipede with me. It would take too long to get his shoes on. Imagine getting shoes for all of those legs. No, I'm going to go by myself. But somehow as I walk, I know I'm not alone. I'm part of something bigger, and there's someone who journeys alongside me. Well, may you know that truth and that reality this weekend and always. Amen.